Hi everyone, my name is Autónoma Prize, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our culminating event of Sant Jordi Day. The Sant Jordi Book Festival in Barcelona is one of the most beautiful book fairs in the world. Devoted to St. George, who slew the dragon to save the damsel in distress, it is the St. Valentine's Day of Catalonia. As the legend goes, when Sant Jordi wounded the dragon's wing, a rose bush sprang up from the drops of blood that fell to the ground. In celebration, gentlemen would give their ladies a rose. In the late 1920s, the Booksellers Guild added books into the mix. Today, on April 23rd, the Feast of St. George, the promenades of Barcelona are lined with bookstands and flower stalls, and everyone buys a book and a rose. We are bringing the party to Chicago with a reading and discussion from Bel Olid's new story collection, Wilder Winds, translated by Laura McLaughlin, published by Grunebaum Press in 2022, and we're here to talk about other titles that press has published because their project is very special. After the reading and discussion, Bel and Alba Girons will showcase a few additional works of remarkable classic and contemporary fiction, nonfiction, and poetry this indie press is bringing into English. And since Catalonia has always been a cosmopolitan crossroads, the celebration then expands to include a short presentation of a new literary initiative. Co-director Jason Grunebaum will introduce the SALT project to promote South Asian literature and translation. Following the festivities, we invite everyone to continue the translation talk over refreshments, and be sure to grab a rose on your way home. Grab a book, a rose, bookmarks, get your book signed. I'd like to extend special thanks to the Institut Ramon Llull, the Farragut Fund for Catalan Culture in the United States, the Government of Catalonia Delegation to the United States Government, and the University of Chicago Department of Romance, Languages, and Literatures. And I would also like to bring attention, there is an augmented reality game that the Sant Jordi New York team put together for the kids in the audience, because there are a few here today. There's a QR code over there. You can prompt the dragon to hop around, either planting roses or gobbling up books. So have fun with that, and I will pass it on to our fabulous bookstore. We're really grateful to be back. This is several events that all of you have done at Seminary Co-op, but Sant Jordi's back for the second time. So do Jonah.
Yes,
thank you.
Hello everybody and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon in celebration of the second annual Sant Jordi Chicago International Lit Fest. My name is Dejana and I'm with Seminary Co-op. Our stores were founded in 1961, and in 2019 they became the first not-for-profit bookstores whose mission is bookselling. That mission recognizes bookstores as fundamental civic institutions and acknowledges the value and richness of literary events like this one. Today we're delighted to be in conversation with Bel Olid, Alba Girons, myself, and Jason Grunebaum. Bel teaches at the University of Chicago and the Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona alongside their work as a writer, translator, and feminist activist. Their first novel, Terra won the Documenta Prize in 2010, and Crida Estela was awarded the 2009 Qwerty Prize for Best Children's Book of the Year. Alongside their fiction, which confronts issues of gender, sexuality, and abuse, they have explored feminist struggles in the 21st century through several essays and have translated, amongst others, Judith Butler's seminal Gender Trouble. Alba is the director of the Catalan and Basque language programs, associate senior instructional professor, and chair of RLL Language Program Directors Committee at the University of Chicago. Loving languages and traveling, she got her MA and PhD in translation and intercultural studies at the Autonomous University of Barcelona. Originally born in Barcelona, she has lived, studied, and worked in France, Germany, and Italy. Jason Grunebaum's translation from Hindi include Uday Prakash's The Girl with the Golden Parasol, The Walls of Delhi, and with Ulrich Stark Manzu's Atishamali, The Tale of the Missing Man. He has been awarded the Global Humanities Translation Prize, a national endowment for the Arts Fellowship, and a PennTime Translation Grant. He teaches Hindi language and literary translation at the University of Chicago and is co-director of the South Asian Literature and Translation Project. A few housekeeping notes this evening. First, we ask that you silence your phones and disable the flash function from any photography. Please also continue wearing your mask over your nose and mouth for the duration of the event as we all work to keep one another safe. Finally, there will be a time for audience questions at the end of the conversation. So we ask that you hold your questions until then. And with that, I turn things over to you.
Thank you for being here today and for sharing Sant Jordi with us. And it's been a long introduction, but we need to thank one more person. In Chicago, we had like 3 days of Sant Jordi events, starting on Friday, then Saturday, and Sunday. Behind all this work, and that's a lot of work, there's Alta, who was organizing all this, so thank you so much. Most of you know what Sant Jordi is. I think we can, but I was reviewing some of the data I had for a few years ago, and I found that 5 to 8% of books sold in Catalonia across the year are sold in one day, on April 23rd on Sant Jordi. So in Catalonia, Sant Jordi is huge. That's it's huge in the sense of if you were in Barcelona today, streets are full of people, stands. Everyone buy. I think people who don't usually buy books on Sant Jordi. It's like everyone buys a book and a rose. And today, at lunchtime, because it's also a very important day for obviously authors and presses. Today, having lunch with Bel, I found out that there's a parallel Sant Jordi thing going on that day, and there are all these private parties where authors are invited, and it's like this amazing also day for all of them. I don't know, Bel, if you want to add. Sorry, I'm really public, but
yeah, it's my first Sant Jordi out of Barcelona since I published my first book. I'm hating it. Yeah, so because I'm having a great time here, but I'm getting the pictures from all my friends, sipping cocktails all day. For 3 days, basically, authors are invited by publishers. We don't make a lot of money, but we are invited to a bunch of parties. So yeah, publishers will invite you to their parties, and there are several parties that are like a big thing. So yeah, I'm basically looking at them from afar and missing them. But next year, we won't have so many book events, and we will have a great party. That's the commitment.
That's a plan. That's a plan. Somebody's recording it, so it's okay. Yeah, so we can maybe jump in because also we started a little bit late, and we wanted to talk today about Funda Estampa, but also about Wilder Winds by Bel. Bel, maybe you want to present the book a little bit?
Yeah. So there was some publicity saying that there would be a reading. I'm not going to read in English. I'm just not going to. I think that would be horrible. So what we will do is we will talk a little bit about the book, and if you are curious enough, it's a very short book, so you can just sit down here and read it. You can also buy it and bring it home, but it's a pretty short book. So if we are lucky, we will make you interested in either Wilder Winds or one of the other books by Funda Estampa that you can get. And we will talk a little bit also about contemporary Catalan literature and what's going on there, because it's the day to do it, right?
Yeah, so Wilder Winds is a collection of short stories. What was, if you want to...
Yeah. So I had published Bad Reputation, my previous short story collection, and it was very dark. A lot of violence was going on. I write about violence, sometimes involuntary violence, and how people hurt each other, and not even like, you cannot really prevent it sometimes. So even if you don't want to hurt someone, you're going to end up hurting them. So Bad Reputation was a lot about that. And after that very dark, very violent book, I felt like writing something, with a little bit more of hope. And with that in mind, I started my book with a quotation by Elizabeth Bishop. Let me find it. I don't want to get this wrong. Yeah. I am in need of music that would flow over my fretful feeling fingertips, over my bitter-tainted trembling lips, with melody deep, clear, and liquid slow. So the idea of starting this with I am in need of music, right? I'm in need of a little bit of hope, a little bit of light. So I wrote this collection of stories, and all of the stories most of the stories, not a couple of them, but most of them are based on historical events that have happened all over the world, in which there's a convulsed political situation, sometimes a war, sometimes a revolution, something's going on, and then someone's having a very hard time, but in the story there's some point in which there's hope. So either by individual action or by community action as well, there's a little bit of hope. One of the stories is actually set in Ukraine, and it's kind of sad because the English translation, this is a book that I published in Catalan in 2016, but the English translation came out right before the war, the most recent war in Ukraine. So that story all of a sudden became extremely relevant. Also another one about the singing revolution. So all of a sudden the book, came alive for different reasons. But yeah, in every little story there's something that makes you, find some kind of fondness for humanity, even if, we don't do a great job of living with each other. So that was the idea of the book.
Yeah, and I'm happy because one of the questions I had was this, was like, you touch all these tough topics, but at the ending there's always this little hope or this message of, which I think it's a view, and knowing you, I also think there's this attitude of how to confront, life. So yeah, I don't know. Another of the topic that appears in, and I'm jumping directly in the book, is related to, well, we have a lot of feminine characters, and also the idea of feminine sexuality and the discovering of the feminine sexuality or non-masculine sexuality appears often during the book. I don't know if you want to expand about that. There's an intention behind that. I was thinking also that when we were talking about the topics we could talk today, we had some good news in the Catalan literature phenomena this week, and it's that another book by a Catalan author, Boulder, by Eva Baltasar, is in the shortlist for the Booker Prize. And it's a book also that touches on this topic, and I was like, wow, I thought that was a cool connection that we could discuss today.
Yeah, so first of all, I love the Eva Baltasar books. So the one that got shortlisted is Boulder. That's a part of a trilogy. And the first two have already been translated into English.
By Julia Sanchez.
Thank you.
Then the
Julia
translator.
Sanchez. And the third one is being translated as we speak, and it's going to come out during 2024, probably in a month. And these are extremely powerful books, and I totally recommend them. And the thing is that when Bad Reputation, my previous short story collection, came out, one thing that I was told by other fellow authors and older authors too was that it was not very usual in Catalan literature to have the flesh, like the body, so present. So that Catalan literature narrative, let's say, I think that poetry is something different, but that in Catalan literature maybe the body, and particularly bodies that are not cisgendered male bodies, are always seen from this idealized perspective, but not with the sweat and the blood and the reality of the body and the desire and the So that was kind of like a surprise back in 2010 when my book was published. 2012, Bad Reputation, yeah. So and in that first book, the sexuality was always very violent. So there was a lot of sexuality as a means for revenge, sexuality in violence and rape. There was, it was the body was being like treated very violently in a lot of the stories. And here I think it's more about the discovery of desire. So a couple of the stories are about young people, teenagers who discover the sexuality and desire and feel the body desiring all of a sudden and don't really know what to do with that. But not in a bad way, in a good like, oh wow, what's going on here, right? So so that's another way of looking at it. And also because I have written so much about the body as a place for violence, I wanted to write about the body as a place for happiness, or for maybe not happiness, maybe I'm going too far there, but at least joy. Okay.
Yeah, for those of you reading the book, yeah.
No, because I thought
happiness. Okay.
Yeah, no, because I thought, oh, this book is so much more, optimist and joyous, and people were like, oh my God, you did this again, right? So dark, and it was like, no, but it's not dark, but apparently it is. So I'm not going to say happiness, but at least the body as a place for joy, as a place for communication as well. And I think that maybe Eva Baltasar's work is more desexualized sexuality sometimes. I feel like it's looked at from like an observer intellectual position sometimes, with a lot of texture, I would say, but it doesn't really make you desire to be there, I would say, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, that is happening, gross. Mine is more like, okay, aha, I can see what's going on there. So it's a different perspective. I think both are interesting.
Talking about the body, and it's a little break because you have a career as a writer of fiction, as a writer of literature for young people, let's say, as a translator, but also you have some essays, and you have an example of, since we're talking about the body, maybe we do a little detour and then we come back to Wilder Wings. What's Hairless? What's...
Yeah, so Hairless, they are both translated by the same wonderful translator, Laura McLaughlin. I think I'm getting close to how that is pronounced. And she translated both books for different publishers throughout the same year. So it was like a Bel Olid year for Laura. And she would like come and go. And the books are very different because this is fiction and this is non-fiction for one thing. But also my non-fiction tends to be very easy to read, not really like complicated sentences. Like don't think PhD writing. No, this is like, I want to talk about this, and I would like anyone, no matter if you've read Judith Butler or not, you can understand it for sure. Like I make sure that I make it accessible, and I try not to make it less complicated. So I can try to talk, at least what I'm aiming for. I don't know if I'm succeeding, but what I'm aiming for is talk about complex issues in a way that anyone can really access. And I think that was for my first non-fiction pocket feminism. It was called Encapsulant. We have had like 10 editions of that book, and I think that's because that happened, right? So it was like a book that's very easy to read for anyone. So it was a big success. And then I wrote one about sexuality that hasn't been, unfortunately, translated into English. But an approximate name for the book would be "Do You Wanna Fuck?" So I think it's an attractive, book to translate. So hello, publishers. Here we are. And that's
Jordi will present.
Jordi, what a fuck. That has worked actually as a pickup line for a lot of people, giving my book to people because it's called "Do You Wanna Fuck?" So it's like that would be like, hey, I got you a book. So that was also a pretty big success. A bunch of editions. I think we are on the 6th right now. And then I felt like writing about something else. But my obsessions are my obsessions. So in the end, this book is a very not ambitious at all. Just thinking about what body pressure and body shaming on bodies that are not male receive, right? So typically it's about the obligation of women to get rid of their body hair. But in the end, me being a non-binary person and feeling the shift from identifying as a woman to finally recognizing, hey, this is just not who I am, and how my own regard towards my body changed. So how I shifted from, yeah, I have all this hair, I'm too lazy to shave, and I'm gonna make a feminist statement out of it, and I'm just not gonna shave, to, hey, I am a non-binary person, this is so cool that I have so much hair everywhere. And all of a sudden, how being exactly the same body, the same person, and nothing changed, just, you know, the look upon gender, how you look at gender and what the gender demands are for everyone, how that changed completely, like the way in which I was able to accept my body. And I hated that, you know, that there was gender was so present in the way that I accept or not accept my body. So that is there in a way. Talking about why we should just not do it automatically. So obviously it's not judging of anyone who shaves. Everybody, you know, your body, your rules for anybody, but really your rules. So don't feel like you have to do something. And how it is actually an example of how violent the norms that are regulating women's bodies in particular, apply. So that's another joyful book.
You want to read that in English, those are some of your options. So going back to Wilder Winds, last year, before we knew that Bel was going to come to the University of Chicago to teach, with our colleague Pau, we organized book talk with some students discussing Wilder Winds. And when students were reading the book before our session, and also I remember having conversations with Pau, we were, and maybe in Catalan we have this expression that is qui busca troba, the person who looks for stuff finds stuff. So I'm not sure if we were projecting too much, if Catalan culture is a small one and we overthink things. But in Wilder Winds, we found a lot of references. We were like, oh, that's like Rodoreda, Catalan writer. Oh, that's Montserrat Roig, Catalan writer. Oh, that's like, we were finding all these references that I'm not sure if we were making them ourselves or there was an intention, or a little bit what's your background in literature and how much do you bring to your books intentionally or not? What happens here? What happens there?
So some of the things are intentional, very obviously, and I don't only use other books, but songs, for instance, are a big thing. And because I am very bad at giving titles to my short stories, a lot of the short stories have song titles. And the book was actually going to be called Abril 74, which is a song by Lluís Llach, who is a Catalan composer and singer who was big. And because one of the stories happened during the Flowers Revolution, the Carnations Revolution in Lisbon, and Lluís Llach wrote a beautiful song about that revolution, so I was like, oh, this would be like a great title. And the publisher was like, no, you cannot call the book that, because people are going to think, oh, Lluís Llach, and then they're going to find this. No, you're not going to do that. But that was one of the possibilities. So I bring a lot of the music that I listen to, and certainly a lot of the authors, all of the authors actually that I read, because either I read something and I'm like, oh, this is so cool, and then forget about it, and then write something 5 years later, and when I read it, it's like, I totally copied that, what happened there, and then I can correct myself, and obviously it's through my lens and whatever, but I feel like everything that I read is it's gonna be in what I write, and not only what I read, but because I'm a translator, also translating is like reading really, really close, so sometimes a lot of what I translate also ends up somehow in my writing. And I do have, in Catalan particularly, a certain rhythm to my sentences, some internal rhymes sometimes when I'm doing fiction. And I've tried to get rid of that, and I can't, but so I'm kind of embracing it. But in some of the stories, I did try to get out of there, and I couldn't. But a way for me to get out of there was to try to write in other author styles, like a first draft, and then going back, changing things, rewriting. One of the stories I actually wrote in English first, and then translated it into Catalan, and it became something else. So it's I like to get playful. Yeah.
How was to self-translate yourself and also from English to I want to know more about that.
So I was commissioned a piece by a German newspaper on Europe and democracy, and I misunderstood. So because I was a fiction writer at the moment and I wasn't really writing any nonfiction, I wrote a short story. And then when I sent it to the newspaper, they were like, no, dude, it's a newspaper. And I was like, okay, can I send you a nonfiction piece tomorrow? And the guy was, you're not gonna write a piece for tomorrow. And I said, what do you mean I'm not? And I did write a piece, and they liked it and they published it. But I had an extra short story in English that I had already written. And it was about how Europe, for the Catalans, at a certain point, it was like a mother. So we looked at Europe as kind of a mother that's going to protect us from the very bad Spanish people who want to destroy us and forbid our language, and, you know, we're going to survive this because Europe's going to protect us. And then Europe was like, yeah, no. So we were like, okay, so it's a mother, but it's not like a very, good mother. It's maybe like a more real mother that a lot of people get. That's like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, you're here. I should be taking care of you. I'm not doing a great job. So the story was about that, about a daughter driving to her mother's birthday party and knowing that the mother's going to complain about everything, no matter what. Yeah, and that was the story. So I had that story written in English for the German newspaper. And I was like, oh, I want to translate this into Catalan. But because that was not published, so nobody knew what the original story was about, so I could make any change. And this is a very good mixture of translating and writing, because when you translate, you cannot make it up. So whatever the original is saying, you need to at least try to say in your own language. And if you don't succeed, you're doing a bad job at translating. But because it was my story, it had never been published, and nobody even knew it existed probably until now. So I was like, yeah, I can do whatever I want. So I could change things, and a different story came out. So it was I really enjoyed the process. Maybe I will do that again at some point.
Thanks, because I've always wondered, the idea of self-translating, I think it's this idea of like, you are translating yourself, so to one point, like after the translator, are you entitled to change things?
No, but when I translate myself into Spanish, because I do translate my work from Catalan into Spanish, and then I try to be a translator. So if you read the book in Spanish and you read the book in Catalan, you will get like the same experience. But that time was not so much self-translating. And I know that there are a lot of translator authors who play around, and I was thinking of Vicente Huidobro maybe, who was writing in Spanish and French at the same time and doing very interesting stuff. But I think that's another way of creating altogether. So that's not what I do when I translate myself. I just translate when I translate.
Because I'm not being rude, like I don't have a watch, so I'm checking the time every time I look at my phone. So we promised everyone also and we wanted to talk a little bit about Funda Stampa, that's the press that published Wilder Winds. Funda Stampa, as it has a Catalan name, but at the same time it's a press born in Catalonia, created by a guy from UK, right? That is from the UK, and publishes texts in English. Most of their authors are or have been Catalan so far. They are starting to publish other authors. They don't want to be a press. I cannot talk on their behalf, but my understanding is the idea is like they don't want to publish just Catalan authors, but it's true that that's their beginnings, and in fact their name is Funda Stampa. So and it's I think it's a very interesting project. First of all, I think it's brave in different ways. That's my opinion. Then you can because they are taking from very classic Catalan authors like Montserrat Roig, Fuster, for example, and translating them into English, to taking books like the Seven Deadly Sins, which in Catalan was like 7 different books. They put them all together in one volume, and all of them, I would say, because maybe it's a little bit, but Adrià Pujol also, well, Anna Punzada, but it's like young authors.
No, like they are all my age, in their 45s.
Yes, but for it,
Yeah,
but they are not the most. I mean, well, you can. I'm not explaining myself very well, but they are not the most mainstream authors, I would say. So we have from very classical texts to very contemporary texts that are really like being published nowadays. I'm sure like Bel, before with them, you can tell us way more than what I can.
And they are, as you said, they are not necessarily going to the most like best-selling mainstream authors. They're looking for interesting things, touching on a number of topics. And for this book, this was, as you said, a collection of seven different books in Catalan. What they did was they really compressed the the title and made just one book out of it. And each of the books is on one of the deadly sins, right? And all of the authors have like very interesting point of view on the topic. And what they do is like some of them write articles more like from literary perspectives, others from philosophical perspectives, and it's a really interesting book. And then, for instance, for Anna Punzada, which is one of the authors here, they have just published Other People's Deaths, which is a novel by this author Anna Punzada, and it's a book touching on sexual abuse as a child and the consequences of that as you grow up. And it's a very good book that I really enjoyed, and it did get a lot of attention in Catalonia, but it wasn't like Eva Baltasar or like Irene Solà. So we have authors that are like really selling a lot in Catalan, selling a lot in English, and getting considered in a bunch of languages. So what Fum d'Estampa does is maybe look a little further from these best-selling authors and find things that are interesting in other ways. I'm not saying that the best-selling authors are not interesting; they are absolutely interesting. Just different.
Yeah, it's that's why I said I think they are brave because they don't. They try to find texts that are a little bit more original. Okay, so because we are, we're running out of time. So we have Jason. Do you want to first or? Okay. So since we have Bel here, do you have any questions, comments for them, Alta?
Quick question, what does fum d'estampa mean? I know it has something with press in it, but what's the fum de?
You go.
I tried to answer that question in class because I brought the poster and they were like, Alba, ¿qué significa fum d'estampa? I was like, my understanding is like, estampa is like the press, fum is smoke, so the smoke from the press.
Probably.
That's I'm not sure if the press makes a lot of smoke or if it's a metaphorical smoke, but fum d'estampa is the smoke from the press, would be a word by word translation. I'm not sure how helpful that is.
My translator intuition feels like there must be something else going on there, but I didn't research it. I'm so sorry. I should have.
Well,
all the bilinguals here, any...
It's not an invitation to burn books.
I think it could be hot off the press.
Yeah, hot
but
off
we had smoke proof, smoke galleys, right? Like,
Smoke seal.
smoke seal or like a
Yeah.
proof. Like,
Okay.
so I think it's a technical printing.
Good. Yeah.
I'll ask
But
Doug.
in it-
Doug
yeah.
is subtle.
Doug will know because, but in any case, I think for me, it makes me go back to like old-fashioned press. That's what I've always visualized when I heard fum d'estampa.
That's the feeling.
That's the feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where my brain goes.
Hot, cold press.
I have a question. So,
I'm always curious about translators' relationships with their authors, and especially when the author is a translator as well. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your relationship with Laura, and how it started, how it evolved, any stories, anything you'd like to share, I think would be very interesting.
Yeah, so I am really happy of working with Laura, and as you said, being an author but also a translator, I think we make the worst authors to be translated, because that's why I translate myself into Spanish. Like, you're not touching my text, but I know what I'm doing here. But with Laura, I have been translated mostly into languages that I can at least read. Some no, like Hungarian no, and Lithuanian no, and native languages in Mexico no. But other than these exceptions, most of the books that have been translated are in languages that I can read. And with English particularly, that I translate from, for me it was very easy. But what I decided to do was, Laura actually was, I didn't know, but she was a big fan of my work, and she made a PhD application to translate Bad Reputation, my previous storybook, which she didn't get. She didn't get the grant, so she didn't do her PhD on that, really. But she could have. So she had some experience translating my work, working on that, and then when Doug asked her, like, what would be a Catalan author that would be nice for me to publish, and Laura was like, oh, I really love Bel Olid, you should publish their work, and they were looking at my books, and then they decided that this one, Water Winds, was not as violent and dark, so maybe they would go for this, and then she was commissioned the translation. And then how it worked was that I didn't want to interfere at all. So I was like, I would really like to read the finished translation. And if you have any questions about anything during the process, I'm open to that and whatever. So what she did was she worked on her thing. And then when she was finished, she had a list of questions that she would ask, and I would answer them. And very sensible questions that I was like, okay, you are a good translator. These are very good questions to ask. I'm in good hands. And then when I read the translation, I was really happy, because I found that the rhythm that it has in Catalan is totally different in English, but there is a rhythm. And there were a few things that I was like, maybe I wouldn't translate this like that. Or for instance, in one of the stories, I knew that the story was set in the 70s, but there's no indication in the story for that. So for instance, when there's these two teenage girls who are playing a record, and she put they played the CD, and I was like, no. It was a record, because in Catalan you say a disc, and it could be either like the CD or the record. But in English, no. So it was like, no, it's a record, and it needs to be a record because this was in the 70s when the Beatles came to Barcelona and had a concert, and that's the night when the story is set. So I could give her some more context because I could read the translation. But overall, she did a great job, and there were very minimal things. And then she was commissioned to translate Hairless as well, and we worked in the same way. And after that, we became, I'm not sure if friend maybe is too big a word, but I feel like she's a good friend, and that we sometimes talk. We share projects. She asks what are you writing now? She keeps an eye out for what I'm writing. She has translated a couple of short stories to be published in different places. In this Catalan poetry special that's coming up soon. What's the magazine called? I'm sorry, my mind died. Yeah, Metamorphosis, thank you. So there's a special on Catalan poetry coming up in next Metamorphosis, and she translated one of my poems for that. So it's a very nice collaboration, and I'm really happy. And yeah, being a translator, I know how hard the work is, and I also know how badly you can do it. So I'm really happy that she's so good.
Talking about translators, and just another speech on Estampa, just for the translator fans in the room. If you go on authors, they list there's all the photos of authors and translators mixed all together. Translators are considered authors in the press. They don't make the difference. First of all, the translator appears on the front page, but on the cover. But also I found that interesting the other day. It was I was like, whoa! So it's yeah, all those pictures of both translators and authors mixed.
An example for all presses to follow.
I don't know if anyone in the room has more questions.
I have another question. To what extent your work as translator has informed your writing?
Ooh. I think it's very good to be a translator when you're writing, because when you're writing, sometimes you want to say something and you cannot really find the words or the way to say, so you will change the story and say something else. That's not something you can do as a translator, so it's very good training to keep trying. So no, but this is what I wanted to say, so I'm gonna work until I can find the way to say it. And I think it's excellent training, and also for me there are certain authors that are very easy to translate because their kind of voice works very well with mine, so I find like, wow, this is easy, this works. And others that I'm really struggling to translate, and I feel that both help. So not to get too comfortable when it feels natural and to pay attention to what you're doing. Because when I was talking before about the certain rhythm that I have when I write in Catalan, I can get very comfortable in there and then not really say what I want to say because the music of the words is, leading me somewhere, and then I'm like, no, but this is not what I want to say, so I go back. So it's made me less lazy, I would say, as an author, because it's like, no, but what did I want to say? And I'm gonna be, true to that and try until I get to say. So it's excellent training. Also, you feel like you read a lot, and that's food for you as a human and obviously as a writer. But when you translate, that's extra calories. So it's like, wow, that's hardcore food. So it's translating is a way of writing every day. So even if you're not doing your creative writing, you're translating, that's a way of writing. So it gives you, other practice. And also when I'm stuck with something that I'm writing, I will go to translating. So now I'm really struggling with the book that should have been sent to the publisher in February. Sorry, Estela, we're almost there. So what I do is when I get stuck, I will go and translate. I'm translating Janet Winterson now, Written on the Body. Oh. So when I'm stuck with my thing, I go back and I translate this wonderful prose by Janet Winterson, and I'm like, oh, I'm useless. I'm never going to write something like that, but I can write something else. So I go and write something else. And it's good. So it's good in that it gives me discipline, it's good in that it gives me practice, and it's good in that it gives me inspiration, I think.
I had a follow-up question.
Okay, sorry.
And when you said, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but maybe Sam, don't worry. So you were talking about Catalan literature and how bodies are represented and the idea of flesh. And in fact, again, in talking with, because one of the things I like about teaching in the US is that when we work with Catalan literature, how you guys read Catalan literature is very different how I read Catalan literature. And I've learned so much these last years here because I had a different perspective of our own literature, and I've reread books and reread them differently. And that's one of the topics that has come to the class, that some students have said, oh, I'm thinking of Rodoreda and La Plaça and the idea of Vaig fer de suro, the idea of the cork, the belly, but also I'm reading now Dystocia by Pilar Codony, and it's this idea of the parallelism between maternity and cows as animals, and how the idea of humanity and what's to be an animal, what's to be human, with the idea of the body when women are expecting a baby, etc. So. And I think we've discussed that in class, that's why, so I'm wondering, would you agree with that? Or when you were talking that, I'm not questioning what you said, I'm just following up because I found that curious because the idea of that in Catalan literature, bodies and the idea of body as a piece of flesh appear more often than maybe in other literatures has come through.
Yeah, I have noticed that all of the authors that you have mentioned are women writers.
Uh-huh.
So I think that when people other than cisgender males write, maybe we write bodies in different ways, and that's more shocking to some readers. So maybe that's what was going on there, and also because a lot of I'm not gonna say all, but most of my characters are queer, like very specifically queer. That was not very common either in Catalan narrative. So my first novel was published in 2009 or 10, and there hadn't been a novel with lesbians in it for a long time in Catalan literature, for a very long time. So I think also me being very like explicitly queer, not being shy about it, making it a part of my activism also in the Catalan media, did some readers look specifically for these manifestations of queer carnality and queer sexuality and queer desire in my books. So maybe that was part of the surprise of some of the critics, because it was not that common in narrative, in Catalan narrative. And I am very happy to say that in 10 years, the scene has totally changed, and we have so many openly queer authors publishing wonderful narrative in Catalan that it's really exciting. And I remember when I read the first book of Eva Baltasar's trilogy, Permafrost, that I was like, yeah, let's go for this, lesbians all the way, and that was very exciting. Yeah, it was because you read English, you're very used to this. You find them, you find them everywhere. But in Catalan, it's more difficult. So there was an anthology that has not been translated into English, unfortunately, yet. That's called Amors sense casa, so loves without a home. And that's an anthology by Sebastià Portell, a very young author, also queer, who writes about queer characters as well, a lot. And he made this anthology of Catalan poetry from the beginning of the 20th century to now, so covering over 100 years. And he gathered a bunch of poems by a bunch of authors that are like undeniably queer in their treatment of topics and what they talk about and in their poetry. But that when I studied them at university, nobody ever said like, hey, let's look at this from a queer perspective. So when you were queer, you were like, yeah, okay, I mean, this is what's happening. But the professors were like, so I don't know what you're talking about. You could read it either way. And you're like, no, you could not read it either way. I mean, this is very clear. And this anthology was published maybe like 3 years ago. So very, very, very recent. So I think in Catalan literature, we are now meaning for the last 10 years, like an explosion of this carnality being there. And not only being created now, but also looking back at things that have been published in the past, but looking at them from another lens. So I think it's a very exciting moment, actually.
I have a question for you. Writing in multiple languages, do you find that when you're writing the body, is there one language that you feel more liberated in than the other?
So I only write in Catalan. So I did write that short story in English that I rewrote in Catalan. Sometimes I have tried to write in Spanish. Spanish is my mother language actually, but for me it was a very violent language growing up in a very violent environment. So I kind of refused Spanish for a long time, and I wouldn't speak it. I wouldn't read it. I would be like, I'm done with these people. So I adopted Catalan as my language, and I only read in Catalan basically until I learned English. So that was a long time in my life. And then I have repossessed Spanish as a grown-up, and I am really happy to read it and to speak it and to whatever, but I've not gotten around to writing in Spanish. It still feels very weird. So I feel that Catalan is really the language in which I can express myself, because for half of my life I only read in Catalan. Then I started reading in French, in English, in Italian, then in Spanish, but it still feels like home. So writing in Catalan feels more like home. And I can write in other languages for fun, and also as a new set of words. So, I have new toys to play with. And I like doing that, but to express myself, I feel that Catalan is what does the best job. So I have more words, I have more tools, emotionally I am so much more connected to Catalan. Also, a lot of Catalan writers will say that they write in Catalan for political reasons, and that's also valid. So because we are this language that not so many people speak, and we don't get a lot of government, Spanish government's help, and basically we have been exposed to annihilation throughout history a number of times. It feels like writing in Catalan is important for political reasons too. But I would lie if I said that was my main reason. So my main reason is emotional, and then also because politically it makes sense. Also, coming here, my whole perspective on Spanish also switched. So it's being very nice for my relationship to Spanish being in Chicago.
Just a quick tag-along question and follow-up to what you just said. How do you think living in Chicago has changed your writing practice? If at all.
Well, it has killed my writing practice. No, I have too much work. I have too much work. So. No, because we work together. So. But no, I have a lot of work, so I'm not devoting as much time as I used to. Also, I have a toddler, so that also helps with the not writing. No, but it has opened some horizons for me. So, for instance, I had never thought of writing in another language. I thought that I would always write in Catalan, and now I'm like, maybe I want to play with other languages. Maybe I want to play with Spanish. Maybe I will play with English. If I play with Spanish, I cannot say this in Catalonia, or I won't be accepted back. So I would have to take a pseudonym, but I might. I mean, there's no rules against that. But it certainly has put me in touch with other realities, and I'm discovering authors here that would have been harder to discover back home. And I'm just like, the first year has been very tough, adjusting and getting the rhythm of everything. But I have like this maybe I don't know, naive hope that now when the course finishes at the end of May, and then until September I will have more time, and the next year is going to be easier because at least I will know a little bit of the city a little bit more, and I will be more used to everything. So I'm really looking forward to this next year of more connection with the city. I have visited. It has been like, sometimes I feel that before I write I need to live a lot, and then I stop living for a while and I write. So I feel like this past year I've been living a lot, and that this is going to explode. I have some ideas of how this is going to explode, and I'm really excited about that. But
I should ask you that again in a year.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And also an example that challenges with happy endings and a positive attitude, like going back to we need to give Jason at least 5 minutes to talk to us about a very exciting project. So Jason, if you want to join us. You want to start? Please. Yeah, there's a microphone.
Thank you. Thank you, Alba. Thank you, Bel. Thank you so much, Alta, for organizing this and for giving me a few minutes to talk about a very exciting initiative that will hopefully bring a lot of missing books to the Western Anglophone world. So South Asia makes up about 25% of the world's population. There are dozens of major languages there with very rich literary traditions, but only a very small number of titles from South Asia make it over into translation. So for example, over the past 10 years, from 2011 to 2022, only 64 titles of translated literature have made it to US bookshelves. We're going to use Catalan as an example of what wonderful things can be done with small-scale interventions. So the project that we found a very generous funder for the South Asian Literature and Translation Initiative, which will be housed here at the University of Chicago in the Department of South Asian Languages and Civilizations, will support all of the things that need to happen for a book to start in one language and to end up in another language. We don't really think about all these things that need to happen, but there need to be translators who need to be trained, so there needs to be a robust system of mentorships. There needs to be attention paid to the process of discovery and acquisition. I mean, how do we identify titles that ought to be translated? There needs to be support for translators and also for publishers, because, you know, as we know, the path to happiness and joy may be paved through literature and translation, but not exactly the way if you want to sort of feed yourself and put a lot of money in the bank. So translators need financial support, and so do publishers who want to, quote unquote, take the risk to publish translations. And then there needs to be attention paid to marketing and publicity. So if we take the amazing, wonderful Institut Ramon Llull as an example of a cultural institute that pays attention to all of these aspects, for Catalan literature in the 1980s, and I'm thanking my co-director Danny Hahn for providing these statistics to me, there were a total of 49 books translated and brought to the English-speaking world. In the 1990s, that was 72 books, and in the 2000s, there were 97 books. In 2002, that's when the Institut Ramon Llull was founded. And from 2011 to 2022, I think in large part because of the kind of interventions that institute has made, 230 books have made it to the U.S. So that is kind of moving from an average of 4 to 5 books a year to an average of about 20 books a year. So we're hoping to reproduce something like this with the South Asian Literature and Translation Project. We have, as part of the first year of the 5-year plan, a summer school planned here at the university in the summer of 24. So this will be, because the name of our project is SALT, of course the name of the summer school will be called Somersault. And it's based on the British Center for Literary Translation model, which brings together an experienced translator, student translators, and authors together to work on particular texts. So we hope to fund about 40 to 50 emerging translators. The project is partnering with the American Literary Translators Association, and we'll be funding 24 mentorships in South Asian languages over the 5-year period. These are individual distance mentoring collaborations which pair an experienced translator with a student translator. We're also partnering with English Pen to help support translation sample grants for individual translators as well as publishers, to support travel grants for translators to travel to South Asia, to visit with their authors. We'll be organizing publishing workshops run throughout South Asia to help publishers in South Asia learn how a little bit more to sell their wares, as it were, in the Western Anglophone world. We'll also be having here at the university, we're calling it a reading squad, because there are lots of wonderful translations published in English for the South Asian market, which could travel very well here. So we'll have a bunch of readers reading books over the summer and say, you know, we think maybe these 5 or 6 titles, you know, could be suitable and pitched to U.S. publishers. We will have a translation grant program for publishers who want to publish South Asian literature, and then also working on publicity and marketing, because you can have the most wonderful book translated, but if the world doesn't get to know about it, that can be a little bit difficult. So we're very excited about this project, and even though it's a little bit off the beaten track here for Catalan literature, I think that what we've seen in the past 20 years or so is really one of the inspirations for the work that we're doing. So thanks for letting me present this, and if anyone's interested, there's a little sign-up sheet with Bel's books up there if you want to be kept abreast on the latest developments in the SALT project. If anyone has any questions, you can ask me now or come up to me afterwards, but thanks for letting me present this with you.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
I'll just hop in for a second. I just want to hop in for a second in front of the mic and thank Bel, you're such a rock star, and Jason for contextualizing. And I completely forgot to say that one of the things that brought San Jordi to Chicago was the Third Coast Translators Collective, TCTC. You're a member of it, Jason. I am. Denise, we have some amazing translators, but so many different languages, different forms of Spanish being spoken in Chicago. So TCTC, the collective, brings more than 15 languages into English, including Basque, Hindi, French, various forms of Spanish, Italian, German, Japanese, and I'm sure I'm missing a few.
Arabic.
Arabic, yes. So I think I want to thank you also because I wanted to also name Mara Faye Letham as translator, and Marianne Newman, I think you mentioned all the Puste, these final judgments that came out last year with a prologue by Adam Gopnik. Just the wealth of literature that otherwise wouldn't be brought to a US audience or the Anglophone world. And it does take, go for it.
No, because you mentioned Fuste, and I don't think you can buy it here, but there's a discount.
Yeah, so first of all, support your local bookstores,
Yeah.
Seminary Co-op. I always do the same speech every time I'm here talking to authors, and I lived in Hyde Park for 5 years. The work that Seminary Co-op does is amazing. It's part of the community. I can't do without 57th Street Books. So first of all, support them. They have 3 titles for us from Funda Stampa. So buy books. It's San Jordi. It's part of the experience.
Grab a rose.
Grab a rose.
I don't want to take a rose home. You gotta take them home
Please
with you.
grab a rose, grab a book, and you need a book today. So that's that's one thing. The other thing is Funda Stampa, the press, it has been running this promotion, let's say, for I think the whole week, and it ends today, midnight Catalan time. That's 5 p.m. Chicago time. You have 1 hour, tick tack, tick tack.
46 minutes.
So for my pronunciation, 40% of all their books. That's a lot of money. So I think it's a great promotion, and it's a great way of supporting a very small independent press. So check their website, and if you're interested in any of the books, of the other books we've talked about today, or if you can just check some of the others, take advantage of their promotion if you
And
want.
do ask us about any authors that you don't know.
Yeah.
And we can recommend those.
Yeah, we can give you suggestions. Yeah. I'm happy to enjoy it. I'll tell you.
Yeah, that's it, I think. Yeah.
Thanks for coming, and yeah.